Hi, I'm Brian. I'm going to talk about code P0507 on a Chevy Express 3500 with the 6-liter engine. Now this one's a little quirky because, typically you'd expect, well, it's probably either idle air control motor or a vacuum leak or something. So in this case, it's really hard to find an idle air control motor, as you may have discovered. I tried everywhere. I even found a video on it on 1A Auto and checked that out, and then tried to buy one through them, and they didn't even have a listing for it. I don't know what happened, if they got pulled from market or what. But in order to get an idle air control motor, long story short, you got to go to the dealership and pay between $500 and $600 for the whole throttle body. So I wasn't sure if we were going to do this or not, because this had been in 10 months ago and it was intermittent, and the customer didn't want to pay that much for it, or was kind of scared off by the price quote of what it could be. And at this point, he's like, whatever it takes, it's a problem all the time. We got to do this and take my family on a trip in this thing. It's got to be safe. So we went for it. We got the throttle body. I bought it, had it in hand, ready to put in. I went to check stuff out. I was checking continuity at the end of the plug. It's better to find out before installing a $600 part that you can't return, electrical parts, rather than find out after. And so I'm just covering my bases, just playing it safe, and here's what I found. So this is a 2004 Chevy van. It's a 1-ton, or the 3500, and the code that I'm getting is a P0507. Check engine lights on, and the idle's too high, like 3500 RPM at idle. So it'll let you put it into drive, but then it just starts taking off with you. You can see that it's got an idle air control valve. It looks the same as every other one that you've seen from the 90s on. And you go to get one for 2004, it says they're not available, but it looks exactly the same. I found one at the dealership. I got that shipped in. It's like $600. It's the whole throttle body. Looking at the wire harness and checking for cracks or breaks, I found that the wires were all melted together pretty much from about 1/2 inch up, 3/4 of an inch up. So I'm doing a continuity test to see if they're burned up inside. On the first wire I did, which is a light green with a white stripe, can't tell if it's light green or light blue because it's all melted together. But I take my power probe and I probe back here on this wire. That's a ground signal, and that's not me being jumpy, that's just the way that it is. And when you get down here on the end of it, you get the same thing. It doesn't matter if you push hard or push light. You can squeeze that against it like that. And I'm getting a waveform, but it's just really inconsistent. That's with the key off. The key's not even in it. It's almost like Morse code, it's so random. See, look at this wire here. It goes from being light blue to being light green down here. Just all jacked up, melted together. And you feel the alternator feels hot. It was in a loom, it should be fine. But we're gonna investigate this before we spend this $600 on that throttle body. I wanna just spend $50 or $60 and get a 1998 idle air control motor. It shows a 2006 on 1A Auto on YouTube with the P0507. But then you go to 1A Auto and they don't have any listing for 04, 05, or 06 that they showed. We're the next wire over, which is a light blue and black wire. You can see that this is a light blue and white wire. Was the first wire we tested, got the ground signal. The colors change when they get into where it melted, so you just got to look up higher. And I'm not touching anything with the other end, having it bounce and be ground. It's just kind of a jittery ground on that end. Usually a jittery ground means computer, so you don't want to run power through it. Just want to make sure that we get the same signal. Might be PCM or body ground. A bad body ground would make a lot of sense on this. So what do we have here? We've got one ground there to the body, and then we got one that goes down to the starter. So I need to have ones from the starter to body elsewhere. But we're going to clean up that body ground now and just kind of see where we're at. Because if the computer's getting a crappy ground, then that would explain why we're getting such jitters here. So our green and white wire's just dead. It gives one false negative just at the very touch of it. But it's basically dead. I wonder if it's my tester, huh? Still doing that jitter thing. So I'm going to take a power wire. And this is just a jumper wire run to the positive terminal of the battery. It's the speaker wire. I got good continuity through that. So I've basically had the same continuity or good continuity through this whole thing. Got one more wire to do, the green and black wire. So working on this one, just for sake of brevity, it was dead on both ends. And so then I hooked up power to it, and I've got power here, and I'm just completely dead here. So we found a problem there. It's better to find a wiring problem before jumping into a $600 thing. I already paid for it, but I haven't installed or even opened it. So here's an interesting thought. The very wire that was dead was the green wire with the black stripe to it. That's the same color that was all over everything else. The blue wire on the end with the black stripe turned bright green. This one was already green with a white stripe. And then this one that's the blue wire with the white. I don't know if that even shows up at all. You can take my word for it, but that's green down here at the base. So this green wire melted green all over everything else. So, and that's the very wire that broke. That's the wire that burned out. It's interesting it didn't blow a fuse or do something more predictable than just looking fine but being melted together and being burned out. I double check the crap out of everything these days, for better or worse. So anyway, I don't have any power here. I do have power on my pin, and so I'm like, well, what if my pin is just off? So I go up a little bit higher and I check the wire, peg through it, and I do have power higher up the wire. Undo the power to this, and that goes dead. I put it back, it comes back. Can you see that? Sure, you can't see the thing where I'm at, but basically I am pinned into the wire good. What could happen potentially is I could pin this wire and not get a good contact with it, not have it touching well, and then that not send power down here through the wire. But this wire is definitely bad. So you can see I've got it pinned just right at the very end of the wire. I have signal here. When I hit the end, there's no signal. So the short's actually inside the plug area. It's not the actual wire that's back here. That just got hot and had resistance, it melted. But the actual place where a connection's lost is inside this little plug here. So you take a screwdriver and you pry these connections off the end. You've seen that before. And just pull off the connector. You see, like that. You'll set that aside by your push pins or whatever. And just remember which wire it is. So you got to pull it out the back side here. So there's a release button that you apply to here. Probably one of my test pins would work. But you basically just push the pin down and then pull it out the back side there. So I'll go ahead and insert the pin. So I've taken a picture of the plug with my phone. As you can see, one of the wires pulled out right there. So what I'm going to do is I have this as an example I can set on the table, and then I've got a whole bunch of wire harnesses to choose from. Like there's a 3-pin that's very similar. That's off a GM. It's actually a crankshaft position sensor relay wire. But I've got a lot of wires here. I can pour them out onto the workbench, and then when I'm done and I've sorted through them and in process of sorting through them, basically what I'll do is I'll just take the box, I'll put it between me and the workbench, and then see the example. This one's a Honda ignition coil wire. We got an oil pressure switch wire here. I'll just go through and just bat a bunch of these in. It's a blower motor resistor wire. That one's GM. But I'll just cruise through this thing and find a plug that's the same. If I can't, then I gotta go to the dealer and spend $30 on one. There's a test light I made, that doesn't go in there. That was for some, I think that was for Boy Scout merit badge teaching. The automotive repair merit badge. I'm a counselor. I found 2 of them so far. I've got this one that looks right. It's the wrong color, but we don't care about the color. The back end's different, but I'm going to just have to splice the wires into it anyway. So there's an option, and then I also found this one, and we'll just have to see on that. I don't think that's a match. We'll set it aside for now, but I'll usually find 3 or 4 that are in here. Another good resource is a lot of these auto parts houses, they'll have these plugs in stock, because if it's a common problem, like melted wires from too much resistance or not adequate cooling being right next to the alternator and having to deal with resistance, you know, thus generating heat, they'll have them too. Or you can go to the junkyard, that's always an option. The junkyard kills so much time to go and find the car, find one that has an engine in it, find one with the right harness and all that. So that's why I save these, because this, you know, if it comes down to going to the junkyard, this can save you a lot of time. I mean, it's a time save, not just a $30 or whatever it costs for a part. Alright, so here's 3 4-wire connectors that I have to choose from. And even if I don't use the connector, because the plastic part on the one in the van is still good, I can still use the little pin that is inside the connector. I can unthread that and stick it into the other one. So I just take all the leftovers, shove them off the bench, and it didn't take me much time at all. So lucky for me, one of these actually fits it. It plugs in directly when you look at the 2 of them. Let's turn it up that way you can see it. And then the proof of that is that when you go to plug it in, it plugs in and locks down and makes contact, everything just fine. So you either need to have one of 2 things. You either need to have a match. Now this one, the pin is actually melted in. That's why the wire pulled out, as I can't get the pin to come out because it's melted. So replacing the pins wasn't an option. This one has different pins. You look at the front of them, you can tell I can't get these to swap, but that doesn't really matter because I'm going to use the whole plug. So this one's all prepped and ready to go. So I just need to cut the wires off. And as far as the order goes, remember you want to look further up the wire so you get it, but you can see the blue wires are on the left and the green wires are on the right. And the black wire is on the right, and the black wire, or the black stripe, is on the right of the blue, black stripe is on the right of the green. And that's with the plug facing up, so I need to remember that. Blue's on the left, green's on the right, black on the right, black on the right. So black right, green right. So I've got these wires all separated, I've got them into rabbit ears, and they're all ready to splice up together. The rabbit ear splice, I learned that from, I think it was Bulldog, an alarm system I was doing on a car, a remote start or something, some product they do. They just stick them together and then twist this clockwise and then twist those 2 together and the other 2 together and then twist those together. Then lay one of them back this way, do the next one back this way so they don't chafe to each other. But in areas where you have heat and resistance and all that kind of stuff, it can cause the solder to get weak over time. But if you braid them together or twist them together like this, they tend to hold really well. This is kind of fun. This is a 2004. This is during the broke years, the bailout years. The crappy wire that has soy-based shielding on it and just way too thin. Look at the difference in the gauge of wires. This is the Chevy everybody fell in love with and went fanboy on. This is where everybody fell off the train, fell out of the boat, whatever you want to say. This is the Chevy that just yuck. I miss this Chevy. This Chevy was awesome back in the late 90s and before that. This part here should be the same from 1998 on through 2006 as far as I know. I mean, they look exactly the same, the plug's the same, but then they say this isn't available. You got to spend $600, $500 on a new throttle body to get the whole thing from the dealership. By the way, in case you're wondering, I'm using a power probe and some speaker wire with some alligator clips. This is a power probe Gen 3, and that's what I'm sending and reading the power with. I'm using some T-pins that you can get at a sewing store or craft store. And this is just some speaker wire made up into jumper cables, basically. So there's our fix, 1998 plug into a 2004 idle air control motor and a bunch of tape. Let's go see how we did. Let's check this out. So before, when we start at the check engine light, I haven't cleared that yet, but basically it would just start climbing like crazy. You just hear the idle go up. Nobody believes in tachometers anymore, but you can see that it's idling fine. Goes right back down. That's so awesome. We could do that in a zombie apocalypse with no dealership in sight, or we could do that in Iceland where there's no Chevy dealers. I mean, like remotely. Okay, so we take our, this is my handy scanner because it's faster than using a big one. It's faster than using the OTC or the Autel Maxi DOS Swiss cheese scanner that doesn't cover hardly anything anyway, even though it says it does. So get it in, get the key on, hopefully before it starts doing its little gig. Now it'll show you how fast it can go. So 04, it's a kind of fast computer, but not super fast. There you go, 507. That's the kind of fast we're talking about. So you go down, up, it's all great. Hold down the erase. It'll clear the codes. I just hold it down the whole time. That way you're just on it, like blue on it. So we turn the key off, and the reason why I keep turning the key off before unplugging it is on a computer area network or CAN system, 2003 or newer, basically most vehicles will have a CAN system. You don't want it to say, you know, lost, you know, serial port bus lost or some kind of stupid thing like that. So check engine light bulb's there, start it up, check engine lights off. We're idling like a frickin' champ. And it's not idle, you know, this was really intermittent. Some people say, well, you cleared the code and that made it not idle high. Well, you saw it, the light was still on, the code was still there, and it was working great. That's a good fix. Awesome. So the next thing we're gonna fix is floppy window syndrome. We'll grab the panel here, put your knee into it a little bit. So the problem with this is it's got rivets, and the rivets are not strong enough to hold, so when you unbuckle this and buckle it, the buckling is what stresses it out. It just rips right out of the sheet metal. So we're gonna go bigger. We're gonna hammer those down flat, maybe do something to get that, because this is pot metal and you need to secure pot metal to steel, so you have to use a fastener. So what we might do is drill a couple of holes here and here through that, and also through here and here, and then just screw it to it. That way these kids can go to Disneyland and not have it rattling and not have the van run away with them. It might be when you put it in gear it runs off. I didn't even get the doghouse off on this thing. Got like part way there. So I put it in reverse, and we'd be doing 20 miles an hour by now if it was the old status, if it was not fixed. So it's great. You're welcome, Tom. There's something really special and fun. As I go in and I replace the idle air control valve on this Jeep Grand Cherokee, this is the valve I just pulled out. You can see it's black and messed up and stuff. The connector, remember this connector? The one with the green and the blue? That came off of this van right there. So the connector off of that van plugs in just fine to the one from the Jeep. And what's funny is you go to the parts thing, let's go to O'Reilly's website, and you'll look at the compatibility for the one on the Jeep. You see here's what they look like new, connector, all that kind of stuff. You'll notice that the connector looks the same. And of course it is, we saw it work, but you can see all the different vehicles that take this particular valve, but it doesn't list the van. But that idle air control motor looks almost exactly the same. I don't know if it's just the end of it that is different and that's what makes a difference or what, but very, very similar. So it's just screaming crazy nuts that you'd have to spend so much for an idle air control valve for that damn thing, when it should just be one of these little ones like you see here. It's nuts.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.